A wealthy woman chooses silence after vocal surgery, until a young doctor's compassion opens not just her voice, but her heart. Under the brilliant glow of the packed arena, Elena Ray stood center stage, fingers wrapped around the microphone, her iconic ballad waiting to be born. The audience thundered with excitement, chanting her name like a mantra. Phones lit up, eyes shimmered, but as she parted her lips, a crack in her voice pierced the illusion. Subtle to most, just a faint rasp, but to Elena, it felt like a scream. She powered through performance on instinct, smiling through the ovation, each note more force than the last. Backstage, she collapsed onto a couch, breathing shallow, throat burning. It wasn't new. Weeks of worsening hoarseness, dismissed as fatigue, relentless travel, non-stop shows. But deep down she knew this was something more. She was losing her voice. Her team suggested rest. Her coach recommended teas and tinctures. But Elena trusted her instinct. Quietly, she booked an appointment at a discreet Los Angeles clinic. Dr. Chong was calm and kind, but concern clouded his expression after the exam. "There's a benign tumor on your vocal cord," he said, sliding an image across the desk. A shadow on the screen. "Not cancer," he reassured, but it required surgery. Left alone, it could cost her voice forever. "There's a risk," he warned. "Even with precision, we can't promise your vocal range will return." She barely heard the rest. Just that one phrase. No guarantee. She nodded, left, and sat motionless in her car. If I'm not the voice, who am I? Elena Ray, the name on gold records and blinking marquees, existed because of her sound. It wasn't just talent. It was identity. It was her mother's lullabies. Her legacy. She delayed the procedure 3 times. On the 4th, with trembling hands, she signed a consent form. The night before surgery, she sat alone in her high-rise, the city lights flickering like applause in the distance. On the table sat her first microphone, black, battered, beloved. She lifted it gently, held it close. "Are you still mine?" she whispered. Her voice cracked like old vinyl. She held the mic to her heart and wept, her sobs unguarded and pure. "If I can't sing," she said to the quiet, "what's left?" In the stark white operating room, Elena lay still, surrounded by machines and masked surgeons. She didn't speak, didn't joke, just stared at the ceiling light and closed her eyes. 12 hours later, she awoke to beeping monitors and antiseptic air. A nurse leaned close. "Elena, you're awake. The surgery went well." She tried to speak. Nothing came, just pain in her throat, pressure in her chest. The surgeon appeared later. "The tumor's gone. Now rest, total silence for weeks." She nodded. He smiled. "You'll sing again. It will take time." She nodded once more, but her eyes held something fragile. That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. No music, no screens, no sound. When asked the next morning how she felt, she reached for the paper beside her bed and wrote nothing. Just stared, and chose silence. Not out of fear, but self-preservation. The world still called her a star, a phoenix. But inside, Elena Ray had gone quiet, in voice and in spirit. Dr. Michael Lynn didn't expect to see that name when he checked the chart. But there it was, Elena Ray, post-op, stable, not speaking. He recognized her, of course. Who didn't? But fame never impressed him. Years ago, music had been his dream too, until his father's illness and life's demands rerouted him toward medicine. Now that past stirred again. He walked into the room quietly. She was seated by the window, posture straight, expression far away, her silence weightier than words. "Good morning, Ms. Ray." "Ray," he said gently. She turned just slightly, meeting his eyes with a blink. No words, no sound. "That's all right," he continued softly. "I do enough talking for both of us." For the next several days, Michael kept to his quiet rhythm, checking vitals, assessing her recovery, introducing light vocal exercises. He never pushed, never asked for conversation. Elena listened, occasionally nodded, often just stared out the window, calm and distant. There was something deliberate in the way she withheld. But what struck Michael most wasn't her celebrity. It was a profound weight she carried. This wasn't just about losing a career. It was as if something essential had been cut out of her along with the tumor. On the 5th morning, Michael brought in a small speaker. Without a word, he placed it on the bedside table and pressed play. Soft notes of a forgotten ballad drifted into the room. Only Sky, a track she recorded before the world knew her name. The lyrics were tender and exposed, filled with yearning. It hadn't charted, but it was real. Elena didn't move. Her body stayed still, but her fingers curled ever so slightly around the blanket. When the song ended, she closed her eyes slowly, breathing through the quiet. Still, she didn't speak. Michael said nothing. He simply played it again. Each morning after, he brought a new song, some well-known, some obscure, all filled with a voice she once trusted. Not once did he ask her to sing, or even to respond. He sat beside her instead, humming occasionally, tapping quiet rhythms on the armrest, a patient witness to her silence. One afternoon, golden light streamed through the blinds. Michael chose Wild River, a song rarely performed but beloved by her deepest fans for its haunting refrain. As it played, he found himself quietly singing along, without thinking, without show. His voice was imperfect, warm, and unpolished. It wasn't performance. It was presence. Elena's hand trembled faintly. She turned her face toward the window, away from him. The silence stretched until a single tear escaped down her cheek. Michael didn't apologize. He didn't retreat. He simply said gently, "You don't need to sing or speak. But whatever's in there, it's still music. And I'll be here when you're ready to hear it again." Elena gave no reply, no sound. But when the song ended, she reached for a tissue, dabbed her eyes, and pulled the blanket closer around her. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't healing. But it was the first note in a new kind of melody, one they hadn't planned to write. Later that week, during a quiet, exhausting night shift, Michael stood in the break room, sipping burnt hospital coffee beneath flickering fluorescent lights. The machines in the hallway hummed in the background, a steady, lifeless rhythm. The door creaked open. Clara entered, an experienced night nurse with silver-streaked hair and kind, perceptive eyes. She moved with calm efficiency, grabbing her favorite chipped mug from a shelf. Faded daisies lined the ceramic. She filled it with hot water, steeped a chamomile tea bag, and stirred in honey with practiced ease. Glancing over at Michael, she gave a knowing smile. "Long night." Michael offered a weary grin. "Aren't they all?" Clara chuckled, settling into the seat at the tiny table. She motioned for him to join her. "Sit down a minute. You look like you need it." Grateful, Michael slid into the chair across from her. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, sipping their drinks. Then Clara broke the quiet. "You've got Elena Ray, don't you?" she asked casually, though her tone held quiet interest. Michael nodded. "Yeah, I do." "She's carrying something heavy," Clara said, eyes distant. "I've seen her come and go here for years. Never for anything big, just minor things. But one thing always stood out." Michael raised an eyebrow, inviting her to continue. "She never brings anyone," Clara said softly. "No entourage, no friends, no family. Just herself. Always." Michael frowned. It matched his own quiet observations. "Ever find out why?" he asked. Clara hesitated, then leaned in slightly, voice lowered. "I got curious once. Asked around. Turns out her mom died when Elena was 12. She paused. "Cancer. Apparently, her mom left her a small collection of old vinyl records and a cassette recorder with lullabies she used to sing to Elena as a child." Michael felt something twist in his chest. Losing a parent at such a young, impressionable age leaves a scar that time never fully erases, Clara said softly. Her eyes took on a distant warmth. Elena once said in an old interview that each note she sang was her way of speaking to her mother. Once again, music had become her lifeline to the past, a way to preserve a bond that death couldn't sever. Michael carried Clara's word with him, the weight settling in his chest as he made his way back to Elena's room. The hospital halls were unusually still that night, with only the faint sound of machines and hushed voices in the background. He stopped at her door, inhaling deeply before stepping inside. The room glowed softly under the dim light of a single lamp. Elena sat quietly by the window, her figure silhouetted against the darkness beyond the glass. A pale blue shawl draped over her shoulders, and her posture curled slightly forward, as if her thoughts pressed too heavily to bear. Her eyes followed the gentle sway of the trees outside, distant and contemplative. Michael didn't speak. Instead, he took a seat beside her, offering quiet companionship. The silence between them was not awkward. It was full, meaningful. It was its own kind of language. The next day, Michael entered her room, carrying a small bundle wrapped in black velvet. The fabric felt soft and warm in his hand. He placed it gently on the bedside table, alongside a folded note, and left the room without a word, giving her the privacy to open it when she was ready. When Elena stirred awake, the pouch's glimmer caught her attention. Her fingers, hesitant, reached for the note first. The message was brief, but it lingered. A voice can rest. A voice can crack. But music, it always finds another way. Intrigued, she untied the pouch and unveiled a small ukulele. The craftsmanship was remarkable. Smooth, polished within a warm honey hue. Nylon strings stretched over a graceful neck and tiny, carved wings dancing across the body. Elena's breath hitched. Her gaze held on the instrument as old memories stirred. Her mother's lullabies, the familiar hiss of cassette tapes, the comfort of vinyl spinning on a dusty player. Still, she didn't touch it. Not yet. Michael, sensing what the gift meant, chose not to visit her room that day, or the day after. He knew she needed time. He'd given her more than an object. He'd given her a key to something buried deep. On the third morning, as he approached, a soft tune spilled into the hallway. The door was ajar. Inside, Elena sat up straight, cradling the ukulele. Her fingers hovered over the strings, plucking out a slow, uneven melody. It was simple, gentle, like the faint outline of a lullaby. She didn't sing. She didn't hum, but her eyes held a quiet glow, flickering with something new. Michael didn't interrupt. He stood silently, a smile creeping in as hope stirred within him. That evening, as he returned to the recovery lounge, he noticed a note stuck to his desk in careful handwriting. It doesn't sound like much, but it feels like breathing. He smiled, peeling the note free and sliding it into his wallet. A small reminder of courage, of growth. In the days that followed, the ukulele's soft music became a gentle background hum in the ward. Nurses paused outside her door, drawn by its fragile beauty. It was as though the instrument had become her voice, speaking what she could not. Though Elena remained wordless, her music carried everything: sorrow, strength, memory, and hope. And Michael, more than anyone, understood. He had once shelved his own dreams of music, thinking healing belonged only to science. But Elena had awakened something in him. Not regret, but recognition. They were alike, in ways that went unspoken. Both had tried to mute their melodies. Both were finding them again. Maybe, just maybe, they could reclaim their songs together. The afternoon sun spilled through the tall windows of the rehab wing, casting a golden light over the worn floor and rows of vacant chairs. In the far corner, near the garden, stood the old hospital piano, an upright model, a little out of tune, mostly forgotten. Michael approached it quietly, fingertips grazing the worn ivory keys. He'd passed it many times, always resisted. But today, something was different. Maybe it was the way Elena had paused longer in her doorway that morning, ukulele still in her hands. Or the way she'd looked at him yesterday. Not guarded, not shattered, just unsure if hope could be trusted. And so he played. The tune drifted gently through the air. It was one of her own, Ashes and Air, a ballad from her third album, written during a time of emotional wreckage the media had turned into a spectacle. But Michael remembered it differently. The raw, acoustic version she once performed barefoot during a charity live stream. Simple, honest, and heartbreakingly real. The melody danced around soft minor chords and intentional silences. He didn't glance toward the hallway, didn't anticipate anyone listening. He played for the stillness, and for the woman who had forgotten how to hear her own voice. He was nearing the bridge when he heard it. It wasn't footsteps or a door creaking. It was a voice, fragile, barely audible, a single trembling note. He turned his head and saw her. Elena was just a few steps away, her eyes locked on his hands, lips parted, sound quivering on her breath. Her posture was tight, like that one note had drained every ounce of strength. Michael froze. She took a cautious step forward and lowered herself beside him on the narrow bench. Her fingers clutched the edge. Her breathing was shallow, fast. She tried again. No pitch, just a breath. Then, pushing through her fear, she sang. Only one line. It shook. It cracked. But it was hers. Tender, raw, and drenched in something deeper than control, truth. When she finished, a hush settled around them like a soft embrace. Michael didn't clap, didn't rush to speak. He looked at her. When he finally spoke, it was quiet and sincere. That wasn't the voice you used to sing with, he said. Her gaze faltered, uncertainty blooming behind her eyes. It was the voice of someone finding her way back. He continued, and that's more beautiful than perfection. Elena's lips trembled. She turned toward him, as if searching for something she didn't have words for, something beyond validation. Then she collapsed forward, leaning into him, her forehead pressed against his shoulder. Her breath shook, and the tears came, messy, real sobs that racked her frame. Michael held her with care, one arm around her back, steady and strong. He let her cry, no hurry in his embrace. And when she finally found words, they were cracked and aching, but honest. I'm scared, she whispered. I'm scared I'm not her anymore, that I left her behind in that room. And I don't know who I am if I'm not that voice. Michael's arm gently tightened around her. Then let's discover who you are. Together, he murmured, note by note. And for the first time since her operation, she didn't pull away. She nodded, tears clinging to her lashes, because maybe she didn't need to go back to who she was. Maybe becoming someone new was enough. The days that followed moved slowly, but forward. Elena, once silent and hollow, now welcomed Michael with a nod. Sometimes even a shy smile. Her voice was still delicate and hesitant, but each morning brought a little more strength. Together they began vocal rehabilitation. Michael leading her through gentle vocal exercises, from humming to tonal slides and vowel shaping. But beyond the mechanics, something more fragile and meaningful emerged. After each session, they lingered. They didn't just talk about her recovery. They spoke of music, grief, ambition, and the peculiar quiet that success leaves behind. Michael admitted he once wrote songs, lyrics and music, that he kept locked away under his bed. Elena, to her own surprise, asked to see them. So one stormy afternoon, he arrived with a folder of notes, pages of scribbled bars, unfinished verses, melodies that never met an audience. I used to write about hope, he said. Then I stopped believing in it. She read them like holy text. Let's write something together, she whispered. And they did. The song was called Still Me. It took shape in her hospital room, stitched together between mugs of tea, therapy sessions, and the rustling leaves outside her window. It was a song about falling apart and choosing to keep going anyway. Not about being perfect, but brave. Michael played guitar. Elena sang the tune, sometimes shakily, sometimes full of fire. Their fingers brushed often. Their laughter returned like old friends. And one night, when the final chord faded, she looked at him a little too long. Her heart stirred, uncertain but real, like the first time she ever stepped onto a stage, when every note was a leap of faith. He was no longer just her physician. He had become her anchor. But the world has its own cruel rhythm. It always finds a way to pry open the quiet things. It started with a whisper online, a blurry snapshot of Elena strolling through the hospital garden. A fan who doubled as a lab tech had spotted her, despite the scarf. Within hours, gossip sites had latched on. Headlines erupted. Elena Ray hiding in private clinic. Rumors confirmed. Health crisis. Mysterious doctor linked to reclusive star. Whispers of romance emerge. Reporters gathered outside the hospital gates, armed with cameras, microphones, and questions that scattered into the air like leaves in the wind. Michael was called into the administration office. We need to prioritize patient confidentiality. They reminded him. I understand, he said. That's why I won't let anyone near her. Afterward, He returned to Elena's room. She sat on the edge of her bed, pale and unmoving. A laptop open beside her. Headlines lit up the screen. "I'm sorry," Michael said softly. "I had no part in it." She didn't look at him. "I know," she whispered, but something inside her had already fractured. The next morning, she didn't show up for therapy. The following day, her ukulele remained untouched on the windowsill. By the third day, she had vanished. No farewell, no message, just emptiness. Michael stood alone in her room, where morning light carved sharp angles on the floor, and stared at the neatly folded blanket atop her bed. He picked up the ukulele, ran his fingers gently along the strings. She had once walked away from the world. Now she had walked away from him. And though he understood the fear, the wounds, the panic of being used or abandoned or misjudged, it still struck him like a song with no final note. He sat on the edge of her bed and whispered the opening line of "Still Me" into the silence. But this time, there was no voice to respond. Michael's apartment was modest, the kind of space made more for sleeping than living, but lately it felt like a monument to words left unspoken. The walls, once alive with music, now echoed with absence. Books lay in untidy stacks. Half-finished cups of coffee lined the sill, and a wilting plant leaned toward the last slivers of sunlight. Everything around him told the story of a man trying to hold himself together while quietly falling apart. Golden dusk spilled to the blinds, striping the floor in his shirt. He sat hunched over on the edge of his couch, guitar balanced against his knee like a friend he no longer recognized. His fingers moved automatically over the strings, hoping something, anything, might lift him out of a hollow ache in his chest. But every rhythm slipped, every lyric vanished, every chorus ended before it began. He strummed, stopped, strummed again, stopped, and the silence afterward was louder than any sound he made. Her ukulele still sat on his desk, untouched. It glimmered faintly in the evening light. Less an instrument now, more a memory. Its quiet presence filled the room more than music ever could. Every time he looked at it, he saw her hands, remembered how her eyes shone, not because she was flawless, but because she was present, because she had allowed herself to start again. But she was gone. He had searched. Her name typed into search engines, entertainment news, old fan accounts. Nothing. No updates. No sightings. No announcements. She had disappeared just as quietly as she had arrived. Days passed in a haze. Work, eat, fail to play, sleep, barely repeat. Then, one evening, as he climbed the stairs to his apartment after a long double shift, takeout in hand and no appetite to match, the doorbell rang. He opened it and froze. Clara stood in the doorway, a little breathless, still in her scrubs, her nurse's badge clipped to her collar. She held out a slim envelope. "She asked me to give you this," she said, her voice warm but careful. Michael took it, hands already shaking as he broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of music paper. No lyrics, just a melody, drawn by hand, gentle and hesitant. At the top, Elena had written in careful lettering, "Still me," unfinished, but waiting. Beneath it, in smaller, more personal script, "If you ever want to hear this again, find me where there are no lights, no stage, just heart." He read it once, twice, a third time, and something inside him shifted, not with grief, but with clarity. She hadn't left because she didn't care. She left because she cared more than she knew how to bear. In a world drowning in noise, he had been her quiet, the one place she felt truly seen. He walked over to the piano, placed the sheet music on the stand, and pressed a single key. It wasn't performance. It was a vow. No lights, no stage, just heart. And if that's where she was, that's exactly where he'd go. The community center auditorium smelled faintly of polished wood and distant dreams, the kind of space where echoes linger and laughter clings to the ceiling beams. Rows of mismatched folding chairs filled the room, occupied by parents, grandparents, neighbors, and curious locals. Children's crayon-drawn posters lined the walls, sunshine's music notes, big colorful hearts, and scrawled messages like, "Sing with love," and "Your voice matters." A crooked banner stretched above the stage, handwritten and fluttering every time the draft crept into the old door that never quite latched. Voices of the Heart, first recital. It wasn't a grand venue, but it was enough. Michael stood quietly at the back, gripping his guitar case as if it were part of him. His heart beat hard, not from nerves, but from a deeper recognition. He had followed her melody, her words, her memory, and they had brought him here, an old church, now transformed into a community music hall. It wasn't a place for fame. It was a place for healing, for starting over. Children went on stage first, their voices timid but brave. One sang a lullaby, another tried a folk song, off-key but full of courage. The applause that followed wasn't just courteous. It was heartfelt. Elderly men and women came up too, reciting poems from old notebooks or memory, their hands shaking, their steps slow. Mistakes happened. No one minded. Every sound was sacred here. Michael stayed near the wall, eyes scanning quietly. Then he saw her, partially hidden behind the curtain. Elena stood in profile, hair pulled into a messy bun, wearing jeans, scuff boots, and a navy sweater that looked softer than any stage costume. No glamour, no spotlight, just her. She knelt beside a young girl, adjusting the mic to fit her height. She smiled, gave a thumbs up, and laughed. The sound hit him like warm sunlight filtering through glass, gentle, unexpected, completely real. His chest ached, not from longing, but from knowing. When the host walked up to the mic and said, "Now, please welcome our featured musician," Michael already understood. He stepped forward, walked the narrow aisle, climbed the short steps, and sat on a wooden stool. The guitar rested against him like an old friend finally reunited. The lights overhead flickered, not for drama, just age. He played the first chords of Still Me. The room fell silent. Michael's voice was steady, smooth, full of quiet feeling. He didn't take his eyes off the curtain. Then she stepped out, barefoot, composed, and fearless. Elena moved like the floor itself had called her forward. Her face wasn't posed. It was peaceful, the expression of someone who had stopped running. She stood beside him, closed her eyes, and then she sang. "Even when the lights go dark, I'm still me and you still see." The room didn't breathe until she smiled, until Michael turned to her with that look that said, "You're home now." Then the applause broke open, not polite, but full. People stood, clapped, cried. Michael placed his guitar aside, stood, and gently took both her hands. Their foreheads nearly touched as he whispered, "You don't need applause to be yourself. Just belief, and I'll always hear your heart." And this time, she believed it. Every word. 1 year later, Elena Ray no longer filled arenas. Her name didn't light up marquees. But those who heard her now, in quiet corners where the world forgot to listen, said she had never sounded more alive. She and Michael had released a small independent EP called Whispered Light, 5 songs born from silence and rediscovery. They recorded it in a converted barn, using a single mic, letting birdsong and wind spill in through open windows. The result wasn't polished, but it was truthful, and it moved people in ways perfection never could. They didn't go on tour in the traditional sense. Instead, they went where music mattered most. A children's cancer wing, a retirement home where an old woman, silent for weeks, spoke again when Elena sang beside her. A shelter for runaway teens who closed their eyes and breathed deeply when they heard Elena's quiet voice and soft ukulele. Michael became more than her collaborator. He was her anchor, her peace. They learned to travel light, guitars, a single amp, notebooks full of half-formed songs and quiet hopes. No staff, no contracts, just purpose. Elena never returned to the stage that once claimed her. She didn't need to. She stood taller now, freer. When she sang, it wasn't to impress. It was to reach people. One autumn evening, they arrived at a small lakeside town with fewer than 1,000 residents. The locals had built a wooden dock that doubled as a performance space. Children spread blankets across the grass. Fireflies blinked in the air. Someone brought a pie. As their final song faded, "Still Me," now half lullaby, half anthem, Elena turned to thank the crowd. But Michael had already placed his guitar down and dropped to one knee. The lake mirrored the twilight sky. He held a small carved wooden box and said softly, voice unwavering, "I don't want to be your spotlight or your stage. I just want to stand beside you wherever the next song takes us." She looked down at him, at the faces glowing in lantern light, at the life they had built from quiet, and into his hopeful eyes. Her voice didn't shake. "You didn't save my voice, Michael. You gave me a reason to use it again, even when no one was listening." He opened the box. She knelt beside him. They kissed beneath the sky turning gold. And somewhere gently, the final note of a once-lost song drifted into the trees. Thank you for joining Elena and Michael on this unforgettable journey. Not a fame rediscovered, but a self-rediscovery. A love story not born beneath spotlights, but in quiet, in stillness, and in healing. You didn't save my voice. You gave me a reason to use it again, even when no one was listening. Let that be a reminder to us all. The most powerful voices are the ones that rise after being broken, and the truest love doesn't need an audience, just one heart brave enough to listen. If this story moved you, brought tears to your eyes, or reminded you to believe in second chances, please subscribe to Echoes of Resilience. We don't just tell stories. We share truths. We share healing. We share you. Click to subscribe and be part of our growing family of story lovers. Until next time, keep listening, not just with your ears, but with your heart.